And that guest is Gregory Delzin. I made sure not to say it as Denzel because we had a conversation before, and he's an attorney at law, and we're going to speak about the organization that you have formed and the work that you are doing. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning. No, I haven't formed that organization. The Sentencing Commission of Trinidad and Tobago is actually a body that was established by an act of parliament.
Right.
And we were appointed by the president to that body in 2018.
2018.
April of 2018.
So you're 1 year in thus far?
Yes.
Roughly.
The act itself was passed in parliament in 2000.
Right.
But it took 18 years for it to be activated.
Put into action, right.
So that the president appointed us in 2018, and we are now about the process of setting up the organization, getting office space, hiring staff, that sort of thing.
And what is the main focus of this body?
The Sentencing Commission, the purpose of it is several different areas. One is to make sure that there are sentencing guidelines developed to advise people like the Attorney General and Parliament so that when they are passing laws, they ensure that those guidelines are or those sentences are consistent with the types of offences. We are also required to look at the nature of offences and make recommendations as to the changes in the nature of offences if necessary. We are required to obtain data from the society at large that will inform our decision making.
How will you obtain that data?
Well, that's part of the remit. We have to hire staff, and we actually have to get people to go out into the society, into different organizations, and obtain the data that would allow the Sentencing Commission to make its recommendations. And more importantly, the Sentencing Commission is much more than sentencing. It's also about looking and reviewing the entire administration of justice and making recommendations to the state for improvements and changes to the administration of justice. That means prisons, police, court, that sort of thing. So it's a very wide remit.
Yes, definitely. And with that being said, you know, you're 1 year into the act being activated. What is it that, you know, you really want to come out of it? You know, well, you said you are now looking to get staff organized and everything like that, and collect data.
Mm-hmm.
What is the ultimate goal of the commission?
The ultimate goal at the end of the day is to advise the Attorney General and the Chief Justice and the Chief Magistrate in relation to those changes, those recommendations that we would make, so that laws necessary may be changed by Parliament. And that advice is in relation to, as I said, reviewing the administration of justice generally, suggesting changes to that administration, as well as looking at the sentences that are attached to various acts of Parliament or by the courts, and to issue guidelines as to how those sentences ought to be administered by the courts to ensure, in other words, parity or equality between different persons who before the court, to ensure that it's equal and it's consistent.
All right. So give us an example of some of the things that you are looking at in regards to the law and what is in place right now.
The current debate about the marijuana, the use of marijuana, and questions as to whether it ought to be decriminalized, and if so, how, to what extent. Those are things that fall within the remit of the Sentencing Commission.
Right.
So that the Sentencing Commission, if we had the staff and the wherewithal, would be going out to the society, having public meetings concerning these things, collecting data about who has been charged for marijuana offenses, what is the age category of persons been charged, what social or economic strata in which the majority of persons have been charged, what are the benefits or pitfalls in relation to marijuana in the society generally. And when we take all of those things into consideration, and also looking at it in the context of the current law itself, then we would be able to advise the government, this is what we think ought to be done in relation to, for example, marijuana.
For example, marijuana.
That process will be for most things.
For most things that you're looking to review and recommend reform.
Correct.
And to update maybe some of the more archaic laws.
Correct. I don't know, if you recall, there have been several commissions of inquiry in this country over many, many years looking at different aspects of the administration of justice. So I think the thinking behind the Sentencing Commission was to have a body that was consistently and constantly looking at these areas without having to do these types of commissions of inquiries.
Right.
So that the government and parliamentarians and the Chief Justice and the Attorney General, etc., would be informed of the current state and therefore would be in a position to make changes.
All right, you said something earlier that if you had the staff and whatnot, what is it that is preventing the commission right now from obtaining the staff that they need to do the work they need to do?
Well, there's a lot of bureaucracy involved, as I have discovered since being named chairman. We have no office space. We have a budget that has not yet been, I think, approved. Therefore, we can't hire persons as yet. Our terms and conditions haven't been fixed as yet. So that basically what we've been doing for the last year is we've created an organizational structure. We have created job positions. We have created a mission statement. So we've put in place the things that need to be done. But what we need now is essentially the input of the state in terms of money and support to ensure that these things come off the ground.
So how are you going to get the state involved, or how are you going to have the process expedited to get to your next step?
Well, I don't have the power to do that. All I can do at this stage is to meet with the state and to persuade the state as to that the law has been created by Parliament, and therefore there's an obligation in the state to ensure that the law is obeyed. That's the first thing. And secondly, now that the president has activated the commission, there's an obligation now to act consistently with that law and make sure that the Sentencing Commission is put into operation. We can't, as a government, not as a government, as a state, we can't be saying, that people must obey the law. And yet when there are organizations created by Parliament that are brought into being, it's just left there in a static or in a system where we are not able to perform the function that Parliament has ordered us to do.
Right.
So that it may be a question of money. We know we are in hard times, and it may be the government has a problem with getting the money. But at the same time, that is not my function. My function is to ensure that I do as best as I can to ensure the government complies with the law.
And to ensure that the mandate you have been given is fulfilled.
Correct, because it is for the benefit of the society. When you look around now, we're talking crime all over. We're looking at Parliament and we're seeing that acts are being passed in Parliament that criminalize certain conduct, the seizure of assets and these sort of things. All of those things have a sentencing component with it. And that was our function. Our function is to advise the state as to that sentencing component, among other things. So that what you have really is acts of Parliament being passed without the input of the lawful body that was authorized and expected to have an input into that function.
Definitely a lot to be discussed and things to be moved forward, and hopefully it can be expedited in a hasty way so that you can, the body could actually do the things that you need to do to get these things done.
Yeah, because there's a very important area, and that is that parliamentarians need to know what they need to put into the law.
Right.
If not, it tends to be either irrelevant or will need changing soon.
Need changing and updating.
Correct.
As we spoke about before. Gregory Delzin, attorney at law and chairman of the Sentencing Commission. I want to thank you for all you've shared this morning.
Thank you very much
for being here. And we look forward to good news from you as this process becomes expedited at some point in time, and we could see that you are able to fulfill the duty that you've been given.
Thank you very much.
All right, Trinidad and Tobago and the rest of the world, we're going to take a short break and we'll be right back after this.